So the Nintendo Entertainment System was launched in the US October 18th, 1985. And that was actually only came out in New York. And then I think a few weeks later they released some test units in Los Angeles too. And basically it was such a big hit that they had a nationwide release in February of 1986, which is 20 years ago, pretty much now.
Nintendo used Rob the robot to say, look, it's not a video game system, it's a robot toy.
Rob, my robot-operated buddy.
I actually had the robot, right? I had my Rob when I went to college, but we would use him to hold like beers and stuff. He had the tray. We just put our beers while we were playing Final Fantasy on Rob, and he was like our beer holder.
So the robot was good for a lot of other stuff, like picking up G.I. Joes and dropping them into vats of killer acid, big evil Cobra robot. That was pretty cool, but Gyromite's not so good.
I was one of those poor kids who didn't really have a whole bunch of accessories, so I kind of reasoned with myself that, you know, Rob was a dumb accessory anyway because I didn't have it.
Who doesn't like robots? Everyone loves robots. Everyone wants a robot toy. Check it out. Buy this thing.
The Zapper was great. I mean, it was like stock. You got a Zapper. It wasn't like one of those, oh, I gotta go buy a light gun. You had the Zapper. You had the one light gun that you used for everything.
This to me was the most amazing piece of technology ever at the time. I could point this at the screen and then it would shoot stuff on the screen, and that made no sense to me as a child that could work. But it sold me.
I don't know what this orange Zapper business is all about, because I had the original gray Zapper.
But I still don't approve of this awful orange. It's like the other one was gray and white. Who thought that? What sort of gun manufacturer is making guns that look even remotely like the old Zapper?
I really liked Hogan's Alley. A lot of people like Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt ain't all that.
I was just so stoked about the fact that I could sit there and shoot this at the screen and the ducks would die, and that was awesome.
You know, I got some rounds of Duck Hunt in.
Sucker ass bird. What?
You gotta blast that stuff. You gotta peel Cap's back.
I wanted to shoot the dog, but...
Could you shoot the dog in Duck Hunt?
No? No. That's disappointing.
I just really wish that thing actually worked on the dog, and I still kind of do.
I'd like point the gun at the dog. Am I gonna pull the trigger? No, I'm not gonna pull the trigger on the dog.
The Power Glove was one of those things that you saw in magazines, and it just seemed like a bad idea right off the bat.
It was like this kind of holy grail of the NES, and everybody wanted one. Everybody wanted to see what it was like.
The Power Glove on its own was awesome.
I don't think I need to speak on the Power Glove. I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was so excited to finally get a chance to check it out. And it was awful.
It took us like literally seconds to realize how completely worthless it was.
And then the second that you realized you had to put the pieces of plastic with the speaker looking things around your TV, you just knew it wasn't going to work good.
Oh, the Power Glove. This is quite possibly the worst idea for a peripheral ever.
It still looks pretty fresh though. I mean, this one's kind of dirty.
This thing is so dirty, by the way. It is f***ing filthy. I'm gonna wash my hands after taking this thing off. This is nasty. It's like got butter on the inside of it. It's disgusting.
So all these peripherals are just all crap. Anytime they try and decide like, oh, we need to change things up a bit, make something crazy, it's always garbage. Here's what you do. You put the game in, like so. You push it down. And that's it, really. If you were taking care of your business, that's all you had to do. If you were some kind of dirtbag that couldn't take care of a Nintendo, then that's when you had to do all kinds of unsightly business. I mean, everyone had to blow in cartridges and blow in here. And
I know some people claim to have done voodoo dances or, you know, sacrifice goats to get their games to work.
The surefire way to make sure your NES games go.
I did the thing where you just kind of pulled it as far out as you could.
I would always have tricks of kind of sliding the cart a little bit to get the pins to line up a little better.
Wiggle it to the side.
And you push it in just as far as you can. So you try to put it up, no, not quite. Push it a little bit further.
But what you do is you just push such a way that it's sort of all the way to the back. You give it the extra little push to the back, and then you push it down.
Sometimes you have to, you know, tilt it up and down a few times.
It required a gentle coaxing in order to work.
Just blow it, you know, try to get some of that heat.
not going to do anything.
Blowing again. I mean, there's a whole science to this.
Do that about 50 times.
It works better when you have the Power Glove enabled.
That's how you make your NES games go.
I still have my original Nintendo from Christmas '85, and it still works. We can still push it down in there. It still works just fine. So my original NES still goes. So if yours doesn't.
I've never saved for anything, like, ever, but up to that point. Like, I was really bad with money, you know. It's like I would, save $20. I'd go, ooh, action figures for Mask, and then I would buy that, and I wouldn't have money anymore. And I scrimped and I saved for, like, my allowance for months, dying to get one. And I finally saved up $100, and I totally bought an NES.
The first money I ever earned as a kid, I quickly spent on a Nintendo Entertainment System. I won an art contest and got $100 for it, and I was like 10 or 11. I had to stand in front of this big crowd. They're like, what are you going to do with the prize money? I said, I'm going to buy a Nintendo Entertainment System. That's exactly what I did.
Here's my question. Why did everybody call the games tapes? Am I alone in this? Maybe it's just something from the South, but everybody called them Nintendo tapes. Have you ever looked at one of these things? There's no moving parts. There's no obvious tape anywhere. There's a circuit board in there. You see connectors. You don't see any tape. You don't see any reels. There's obviously no sound when you put it in that means that the tape's spinning or anything.
Getting games was a much more devious process back then. There was a lot more you could do to get your hands on some games if you wanted games.
If there's any criminal behavior in my past, it relates to how I procured new Nintendo Entertainment System games.
Because stores hadn't quite figured out how to work with video games. They all had these really open return policies. It was like, hey, 30 days, you don't like it, or whatever, if it's broken, I don't know, bring it back. So you just got on this kick where, it's like I would go buy Renegade, for example. I would play Renegade for about a week and then realize that game was crap. And then me and my dad would go back to Toys R Us or something, and we would, this game doesn't work, or we don't like it, or it didn't matter what you said then, because they're like, well, this is the policy. So you could kind of just long-term rent games.
They'd give you the same receipt, they just append to it.
But that was pretty much how it worked. You would go and you would return games until you found one that you felt was worth actually hanging on to, or eventually the receipt that tracked all of this process got so long that you eventually kind of started feeling guilty about it, and you just be like, all right, I'll just keep this one.
But this receipt got to be very long, and I don't like confronting salespeople, so I got to be very embarrassed about this, but I had to do it. And then when the day came when they said, our satisfaction policy no longer applies to video games, I felt like I was probably personally responsible for that happening, but the reality is I probably wasn't alone.
I did the whole deal where I would make friends so that I could, borrow their NES games and then forget to give them back.
I would rent a game from them, and if I really enjoyed that game, what I would do was I would gingerly peel off the label and replace the label with a game that I really didn't like. I would rent POW, and I would return Amagon. This actually worked for a while until I got caught, and that was a learning experience for me.
The NES, I think, inspired a lot of really violent activities. It's probably good that it's not around as much today, because I think there'd be a lot more conflict in the world.
I guess I had emotional problems when I was younger because I would get really pissed at my NES when I would lose a game, and so I would beat the crap out of it, right?
I have absolutely no idea how long I played my NES. I do know that I ended up with many, many bad cases of NES thumb. I guess that's when you have the actual imprint of the button on your thumb, and your thumb really hurts because you've been, either jumping a lot in Super Mario Brothers, or you're playing pro wrestling and just hammering that button to try to grab the other guy or something like that. But I played that unhealthy amounts of my NES, and looking back, I wonder if I could have spent some of that time studying or something like that. But I guess it's all water under the bridge now.
I had a fat stack of Nintendo Powers.
If you played Nintendo when you were like 1985, 1996, you had Nintendo Power. That was part and parcel.
And yeah, that was a great magazine at the time, because for most kids, or anyone in general, there weren't too many sources for game information.